Bring jurors in. All right, Mr. Hahn, if you'll resume your seat, and bailiff, if you'll bring jurors. Gentlemen, hope you had a good lunch recess. Mr. Arbor, further questions for this witness?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Hahn, before the lunch break, we were talking about your awareness that Mr. Broyhill was not, he had issues with respect to how he managed his own money, correct?
I guess so.
Well, you knew about him constantly hitting the overdraft when you were younger, right?
Yes, sir.
We talked about that time on the Myrtle Beach trip when he spent the money, correct?
Yes, sir.
You knew when he moved to your home in Raleigh in 2009, he was driving a blue Nissan Altima, correct?
Yes, sir.
There came a point where that vehicle got repossessed, and you were aware of that, isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
Because he hadn't kept up with the payments on it.
Yes, sir.
You knew this about him. You knew that this was an issue with him about money and bills and things of that nature because you'd seen that, right?
Yes, sir.
In fact, I think that might be the time that you said you helped him out by letting him drive your car a lot when he had to go to places, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then subsequently, you helped, there was another mutual friend, a Nick Richardson.
Yes, sir.
You know him?
Nick Richards. Yes, sir.
Richards, I'm sorry, I said Richardson. How do you know him? Was he from one of your school friends or
He was from Lenore.
from Lenore?
Yes, sir.
He had some, like old, well, I might not consider it old, some 1990 something Volvo that was it was drivable. And yet sort of helped Mr. Broyhill find this thing and maybe suggest to him a good idea to buy it for like $800 or something, right?
Yes, sir.
Just so he'd have a vehicle to get around in.
Yes, sir.
You knew he couldn't register that vehicle because it couldn't pass inspection, right?
I don't know if I did or not, sir.
You recall him putting the tag on that car from the Altima that had been repossessed?
I do not.
Okay. But fair to say this was not, I mean, I remember from the pictures at the scene, you were driving, and I realized they were used cars, but I think one of you was driving a BMW, right?
Yes, sir.
Was that you?
Yes, sir.
And your wife, Jamie, what'd she drive, an Acura?
Yes, sir.
Um, so as I said, from what you could observe about Mr. Broyhill, he didn't hold himself out as a person with a lot of money. Would that be a
Correct.
fair characterization?
Yes.
You mentioned, I asked you some questions about knowing what you knew about his family. You mentioned his dad and his stepmom, right?
Yes, sir.
And you knew he had a sister. Of course, you testified you were a member of the church, and it sounded like you got a little more active in the church after that Daytona trip. Would that be fair?
For a period of time, yes, sir.
And so you, correct me if I'm wrong, got to know more of the people in the church?
Yes, sir.
You knew you knew, and of course you've already testified, you got to know John. You knew he had a sister, Becky, right?
Yes, sir.
You'd met her.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned something about meeting his mother.
Yes, sir.
You thought you'd done that.
Yes, sir.
You remember that?
It was a very brief meeting. I believe she was living in Hudson, which was a town south of us, and your client and I decided to stop, but he had to stop by to see her for some reason. That's what I recollect, at least.
Any
That was
kind-
a very short period of time.
Any kind of a, so it was not a long visit.
No, sir.
Was it,
I don't even remember what year it was, sir.
so this could have been like, what, before college?
It may have been.
So this is like, you don't even know when this happened.
No,
Just
sir.
remember it happened at some point.
Yes, sir.
There was, you recall my client telling you that his mother at least, maybe at one point lived in Florida,
Yes, sir.
and that she had left his father for a younger man.
I don't recall that specific conversation. I just knew that they had divorced.
Which was there was an issue for him, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
I mean, he loved his, well, at least, he didn't have really much of a relationship with his mother at all. Would that be fair?
Not during the time that I knew him.
That's what I meant. In the time that you knew him, you did not know him to have much of a relationship with his mom.
Yes, sir.
The father, yes.
Yes, sir.
With his father, and I may have asked this, I don't think I did, that was an issue for him because of his homosexuality, wasn't it?
Clarify.
Father wasn't very approving of homosexuality. Would that be fair?
I assume not.
Did you ever hear my client refer to him as like the king of denial?
I believe so.
So when, in the time you knew him, you had this father that he had a little bit of difficulty, well, not a little bit, he had a lot of difficulty sort of coming out to this is my lifestyle with,
Yes, sir.
and a mom who he had no relationship with.
Not to my knowledge, sir.
He complained to you on a number of different things about being depressed about certain things, correct?
Yes, sir.
He was depressed about his family situation, right? With the mom and dad, and
He wasn't overly enthusiastic about holidays.
holidays were difficult.
Yes, sir.
Quite honestly, and in many very real ways, you and Jamie became more of his family than anybody else. Would that be fair?
I think that's correct.
I mean, you helped take care of him. You were his best friends. We talked about the trips. And you were, you didn't, you didn't disapprove of him.
No, sir.
I mean, his weight was always an issue for him. Would that be fair?
It was.
Concerned about that he was overweight, and you know, in fact, your wife would she'd try to help him like with eating right and things like that. You
Yes,
didn't
sir.
always follow the rules,
Yes, sir.
but and I mean you've always known him to be overweight. Would that be fair?
Yes, sir.
Even with his sexual identity issues, that was a depressing thing for him, wasn't it?
I believe so. Yes, sir.
Because he couldn't feel he could be totally open with it. He could with you and your wife, but and maybe with some of the people that he was becoming friends with here in Raleigh, but not everybody he knew. Would that be fair?
He was open with almost everyone from who was here in Raleigh or in the surrounding areas.
But not so much back where he came from, right?
I think it was a case by case.
And even with you, I mean, you and I say you, I mean you and your wife. I mean, you were trying to be you're supportive of him, and just because he's gay, that didn't mean anything to the two of you, correct?
Correct.
But there were times where there was at least a suspicion of him having, and this sort of went to the question of his credibility. I mean, there were times where you especially would raise whether he was being completely honest about certain things, correct?
On occasion.
I mean, he took, I think you mentioned it, some kind of trip to Las Vegas to see a guy, and I think he gave you some identity of someone he was going to go see, and it wasn't the person that he was telling you it was, right?
Correct. That was the biggest instance.
It wasn't so much you and Jamie disapproving of him. It was just sort of, trying to tell him to be careful about who he makes connections with, things of that nature, right?
Sure.
And this depression thing, this was something that Jamie was very aware of about him being. In fact, she referred to it a lot as getting a funk, right?
Yes, sir.
Well, as part of this investigation, one of the things that you did was you searched for like emails that you might have gotten from your wife, particularly with regards to Mr. Broyhill,
Yes, sir.
and you made copies of them and you forwarded them on to the Detective Morse so that they could be in case that they'd be of some value in trying to prosecute this case, correct?
Yes, sir.
And it went back a fair amount of time. These events that happened in 2013. The funk, the word funk, I'm using that. John would get in these funks going well back before that. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
And Jamie worried about it, didn't she?
Yes, sir.
You recall sending an email or a chat. And these are these chats we're talking about that you guys would do in the afternoon. Sometimes you were able to pull a record up from that, and then those are the things you're forwarding on to Detective Morse, right?
Yes, sir.
There was one from you looked them all over before you sent them.
Yes, sir.
You remember one from February 12th of 2013. That was closer to the event where Jamie told you she was worried about John, but even though he's assuring her that things are fine.
Yes, sir.
Closer to the event.
Yes,
That
sir.
wasn't uncommon. You'd been talking about this topic of his state of well-being, his mental health, and I don't want to use a technical term, just sort of how he was in the way he reacted with you and interacted with you and Jamie. You remember sending Detective Morse an email from July of 2012 where, and I think this goes to that you were talking about when he was saying that he told you that he'd been diagnosed with MS. You remember
Yes, sir.
testifying about that? And I think some of the testimony was that in talking about that, having that, there'd be these days where he would just talk about being really upset and he's like all worried about what's going to happen to him with this disease he's got, and Jamie would try to like talk him down. You remember having an email chat with her about that?
Yes, sir.
And in that, remember her saying something about he always goes to the negative. Something's always probably wrong. Does that sound like something that you recall?
If I remember correctly, I believe that may have been before he told us of the MS diagnosis, and I believe it was when he was going to doctor's visits, which means I think he was assuming that there was going to be, or when he was telling us he was going to doctor's visits. I think, if I remember the context, I believe she was saying that he assumes that something's horribly wrong when he goes for these tests.
So it might have even been before he's saying all this stuff about having MS and that.
It could be. I believe he told us in August, sir.
By October, he would have already said that, right?
Correct, sir.
You remember an email, very short one, where Jamie sent to you in October of 2012, where she chatted with you that John was just sitting here staring at this computer, at the TV, at the rain outside, just staring.
Yes, sir.
Or so after that, also in October 2012. Remember her telling you that she walked in the door, and I'm assuming this is your house because they worked in your house, right?
Yes, sir.
That's where the office was.
Yes, sir.
She walked in the door. The whole house is dark. And John's on the couch.
Yes, sir.
Now he's moved to the bed because you feel like he can't move, talk, or eat.
Yes, sir.
And you were worried about him as well, weren't you?
Yes, sir.
You sent a reply. He needs to go to the doctor.
Yes, sir.
And Jamie's response was he's scared to be alone. Been that way since yesterday afternoon.
I believe that he was stating that it was what he thought was symptoms emblematic of either the MS or like a deeper health issue, like a health concern.
And Jamie wrote to you, she's so worried about him.
You have the text, but if it's in there, yes, sir.
And he's saying things, and it's probably like you say about these illnesses that he's testified to, and he's saying, because there's nothing they can do for me. He'd say things like that.
MS is a relatively debilitating. I mean, it's a long-term debilitating illness. I mean, there's no cure for MS at this point.
If you have it.
If you have it, yes, sir.
You didn't even know it at that point, but what was really going on with him, right?
What year was this?
Oh, this would have been October of 2012.
By that point, he had told us he had MS, sir.
Do you recall the time of day that came to you?
No, sir.
If I said it was at 11:38 in the morning, would you just, no reason to dispute that?
No, sir, you have it in front of you.
So like midday, and he's sitting in your house with the room just dark, and he's just sitting around doing nothing.
Yes, sir.
Conversation. And again, you correct me if I'm wrong. When you save the emails, sometimes you can save it so that it shows like a certain portion of the email, and then there's times where there's like additional responses at a later time, and then it shows you can make it show the additional responses.
If there are timestamps.
I'm probably saying it wrong.
If there are timestamps on it, like 11:28:32,
Right.
11:29:31, that's as you refer to it, an e-chat. Some might refer to it as a G-chat, 'cause it's within Gmail. So that would indicate it was an instant message conversation.
What does that mean exactly?
It means that you message back and forth on like it's instant. It's not on an email. It's like a chat window on your computer.
And the computer keeps a memory of it?
Yes, sir.
So like that one that I asked you about that was happening, and it showed the duration of the conversations too, right?
Typically, yes, sir.
Like the one that I just asked you about on October 8th of 2012. About the house being dark and him being scared. There were some replies in that one about not his well-being so much anymore, but sort of a comment on Jamie's part to you about his stuff. John's stuff was poorly organized at the office. Do you remember her?
Desk was, yes, sir.
And hard for her to access the things he was working on because of his poor organization, correct? Part of it.
Yes, sir.
He also he had like sign-ins and passwords and things, and he didn't always give her those things so that she couldn't access them herself sometimes, correct?
On different accounts or different services, they would have different accounts, so yes, sir.
And it could be frustrating because if she had to answer a question or something, of a client, she didn't always have the ability to answer the question. She'd have to rely on John to give her the answers, correct? About not everything, some things.
I suppose so.
Well, I asked you that because you did say you were sort of very familiar with her business and sort of kept an active interest in it. Did she complain to you about, is that some of the things she would have complained about John not being on top of his game?
She complained about his disorganization, yes, sir.
And there were times where if she had to, I mean, she was his employer, right?
Yes, sir.
If she had to, she'd come down on him about stuff, even though he was complaining of all these issues. She would tell him, you know, you gotta do your stuff, you gotta take care of things, right?
Yes, sir.
I mean, a couple of days after that, October 10 of 2012, she chatted with you. And by the way, that was not uncommon. She could be having a conversation with John, and if he was maybe not performing up to speed, or if he wasn't doing what he's supposed to be doing, sometimes she'd send a chat to you, and you guys would be talking electronically while she's having a conversation with him. That happened, right?
Yes, sir.
With some frequency, actually. Not an everyday thing, but it wasn't uncommon.
Well, she and I stayed in frequent contact. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry?
She and I stayed in frequent contact. Yes, sir.
And, like, I don't know, it's a generational thing. You can multitask better than I can, I'm sure, but I mean, you can have a conversation with someone and be chatting with somebody else at the same time, right?
I think that my friends will tell you that there's times where I pay better attention than not, but yes, sir.
You remember her sending you that one on the 8th where she was kind of 8th of October of 2012, and she said, sort of commenting on his poor organizational skills. She chatted with you, I guess that's the better way to say it. She chatted with you 2 days later on the 10th, telling you that she had to come down on John. Something about the Patsy Keevers campaign, looking for a check.
Yes, sir.
And she told you that she'd asked him to do that weeks ago and apparently hadn't gotten done, right?
Yes, sir.
And she wrote in that chat on October 10th of 2012, goddamn, who knows what else he's failed to do, correct?
If it's on the chat, yes,
Would
sir.
it refresh your recollection? Take a look at it.
I take your word at it.
You remember telling her you need to give him an organizing lesson and require him to keep files and notes in the way you tell him to do it?
Yes, sir.
And in sort of typical defense of him, even though she's just telling you she just had to come down on him, she said, I was kind of like John. Would she say that sometimes?
I'm sorry.
I was like John. What did she mean by that?
I'm sure she meant that at some point she was less organized than she ended up being.
Okay. But she did say that was something she had asked to have done weeks ago, and now they missed some kind of a deadline, September 30th, and that she sort of like electronically. It's sort of like when, I don't know if it's the same thing, but sometimes my wife will tell me what she wants to tell somebody, but she'll lay it out on me first, so I just, okay, you know.
That's fair.
But this is coming to you, it's sort of the same thing, but she's doing electronically.
Yes, sir.
Like when I ask you to do something, I need it done that day. And that's, and she's not talking to you, she's talking about him.
Yes, sir.
Half the time, and she says she doesn't remember all the things she's given him to do, so she's counting on him to do it. And then when he doesn't do it, if she doesn't remember that she's given it to him, and then some client calls at a later time saying it didn't get done, reflects badly on her, correct?
Yes, sir.
And she said to you anyway, and she had told you not just on this day, but other days, when things like this happen, I don't have a problem coming down on him. It's just in general that the stuff in general that she struggles with. You remember her saying that?
Mm-hmm.
So she had no problem telling him off if she had to. I mean, to get the work done. I mean, Ultimately, it was her company.
Yes, sir.
And you said that one of his main responsibilities was this Brad Miller campaign.
Yes, sir.
For a variety of reasons. I mean, when they got the account, at that point, he was still an elected official, correct?
Yes, sir.
And he was also not necessary. He was potential to be a candidate again, if not for the seat he was in, then some other seat, correct?
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, this is an account for her. But in January of 2012, he makes a decision not to run for re-election, correct?
Yes, sir.
And at that point, as a client for Jamie, he becomes a different kind of client at that point because she knows that there's going to be an end to that client at some point, right?
That's fair.
Because it's winding down. He's not going to keep
Yes,
going.
sir.
So she sort of passes all that off to John to take care of so that she can deal with the clients that have potential to be more long-term. Would that be fair?
I think it's fair to say that she would focus on the clients that had more immediate needs.
And so there was this period of time where it was, and you even said something along those lines where John's job was basically go take care of Brad Miller campaign and get it wound down, right?
Yes, sir.
But there came a point where it wasn't getting wound down.
Yes, sir.
There are things that needed to be done. Once he decided that he wasn't going to run for election, if not for that office or any other office, there were things that needed to be done, correct? There was an office that had to be shut down. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
There was stuff in the office that needs to be liquidated or moved away, correct?
Yes, sir.
Records that needed to be stored and something had to be done with that, right?
Yes, sir.
Of course, there were people that worked on that campaign. They were like, you were a paid staffer. There were people that were paid and worked on that company at one point, right?
I was not a paid staffer for Congressman Miller.
Oh, were you?
I was not.
No, but there were
Oh, yes, sir.
other people, and they knew that eventually their job was going to be disappearing because
Yes,
there
sir.
wasn't going to be a campaign to work for. And so, as you approach December 31st of 2012, that's when the term was going to expire, correct?
I believe so.
And the hope was, after the term is over, let's wind it down, let's get things done, correct?
Yes, sir.
But there were all these little things that just weren't getting done, right?
Yes, sir.
And a big part of it, well, there. One second. Those prompted chats
Yes, sir.
between you and your wife about John and his inability to get some of the stuff done that was expected of him,
Yes, sir.
particularly since he'd sort of been told, get going, right?
Yes, sir.
One of the, now you said the MS thing, that, you recall that being said to you sometime in, I think, in August of 2012?
I believe that was the time period. Yes, sir.
So communications in July 2012 would have been probably before you were told that, right?
Yes, sir.
Do
If I remember correctly.
you recall an email, or I'm sorry, a chat from Jamie to you where he's talking about he has to go that day, or she's telling you he has to go that day, to John Wallace's office. And he was the treasurer of that campaign.
Yes, sir.
you remember, this was like earlier in the morning of that day. You remember sending her a reply saying that she should maybe go with him?
Yes, sir.
And her reply was that she offered, but he said he'd be fine alone. And so it was not uncommon for him to go to some of those meetings with Mr. Wallace on his own, and Jamie wouldn't necessarily go with him.
Yes, sir.
And you were here, I think I asked you that, you were here for Mr. Wallace's testimony, right?
For the majority of it, yes, sir.
You might have missed some.
Yes, sir.
If I were to say to you that John went to all the meetings with Mr. Wallace, Jamie went to some, would you say that probably sounds accurate?
I believe that's accurate, yes, sir.
Did you and Jamie, if you know this, get reimbursement checks for yourselves from the Brad Miller account from time to time?
Jamie would if they were, expenses that were sort of outside of the core expenses.
So if Jamie did stuff and incurred some expenses, the deal was they'd reimburse her on those things?
I believe so. I mean, it would be common in campaigns if you book a hotel room or something like that for the campaign that you'd be reimbursed if the campaign didn't pay for it.
I saw a chat between you and Jamie where you asked her whether John would be cutting her a reimbursement check that week for the Miller stuff. I don't know what the Miller stuff was, but I assume was Brad Miller
It
campaign.
must have been some kind of campaign expenses, yes, sir.
And she told you yes, and you reminded her, don't forget to for you to give her, you were reminding her to tell you not to forget to give her receipts for Charlotte for some joint meals or something like that. Would you go on some of these Brad Miller things?
That was probably for the Democratic National Convention that year, sir.
And so when they'd reimburse you, that they just, if you're going along, they're really reimbursing Jamie, you just.
Well, we had joint, all of our money was in a joint account, yes, sir.
So, there was that. There was the ability to write checks from Brad Miller for reimbursement of certain expenses to Jamie.
Yes, sir.
That, your understanding was not the understanding for John. He was supposed to get paid from Jamie, right?
Yes, sir.
If you know.
I believe so, yes, sir.
Okay. And typically, when there was like a reimbursement check like that, that's who you called. You'd call John, because John wrote the checks. That was one of the things he did, right?
Yes, sir.
You recall a chat that you would have had back in, say, February 18th of 2013. Unless she's referring to somebody else. Who's Perlmutter?
He was the head of the Institute of Political Leadership.
Okay, so that's somebody else.
Yes, sir.
And she was seeking your advice on how to deal with that individual.
I believe that he had been discussing with her the possibility of Sky Blue, doing the fundraising for the IOPO.
I see. And in that same conversation, Jamie tells you, and this is in February of February 18th of 2013, that she realizes John's been sick, but he's been in a funk since November. You remember getting an email like that?
Yes, sir.
Chat like that? But that's no excuse for not, she's telling you, that's no excuse for him not getting back to people.
Yes, sir.
You replied to her, well, what now? You were asking, what did he do now, right?
Yes, sir.
When you say something like that, what did he do now? That sort of suggests that this isn't the first time you're dealing with something like this. Is that fair?
That's fair.
And she told you that she'd emailed Phyllis and Brad again this morning about payment for last month and asking what he wants to do with the NGP. And Phyllis wrote something about the RBM. I assume that's Brad Miller, right?
Yes, sir.
Had gone dark. I mean, that means they can't get in touch with him right then, right?
Yes, sir.
What is this NGP thing? Do you know what that is?
It's a political, geared towards political campaigns mostly. It's a database management tool.
So that's what they would use to create their reports and things of that nature?
Yes, sir.
And then they want, and Phyllis want, now Phyllis, that's Phyllis Barber, right?
Yes, sir.
And Phyllis Barber was the person after, she took over for somebody, you gave us a different name, right?
Pam Cole.
Pam Cole, that was the one who had the MS, right?
Yes, sir.
And Phyllis Barber took over for her as sort of to help be the representative of the campaign to make sure things were getting done, right?
She was the interim congressional district director.
What does that mean exactly?
There's a congressional office, there's a campaign office. She was the interim director of the congressional office until it closed. But she also became the primary point of contact for Brad with other issues.
So she was like the congressman's local point person, if you will.
That's fair.
And then because he's winding down, she sort of as a favor, she was gonna lose her job at the end of December too, right?
Yes, sir.
But she's been working with this congressman. She liked him, so she's gonna help him out also, making sure this campaign stuff's getting done because it still needed to get done, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, things did stay open until, it's okay that it stayed open until December 31st because he's in office till December 31st of 2012, right?
Yes, sir.
But after that, the plan was get this thing shut down.
I don't know that the plan was to shut down the campaign account. It
Okay,
was
in case he ran for something else.
for any number of reasons. I mean,
Go ahead.
no, I'm done.
Okay. And in that chat with you, where she's telling you about Phyllis had said that Brad Miller had gone dark. She also told Jamie that was asking about whether John had gotten the money stuff worked out, right?
Can I see a copy of the statement?
Mr. Arbor?
I think 613 Mile.
I don't mind. 6947.
69.
So Phyllis was asking Jamie whether John had gotten the money stuff worked out. Of course, she's telling you this in these chats. And she said she didn't want to bug him because it was his birthday.
That's correct, sir.
So she sort of, because it was his birthday, she said gonna sort of give him a pass and she'll bug him tomorrow. Your reply was, geez Louise. What do you mean by that?
I don't remember.
We basically say, it sounds like a term of frustration, like what now?
That's fair.
Which suggests that this has been an ongoing thing.
The closing of the Brad Miller office had gone on for a period of time, yes, sir.
And John's been told things to do over and over again, and he's just not getting it done.
Yes, sir.
She's telling you, basically what she's doing, she's venting to you, as if that's a good way of putting it.
That's fair.
She's telling you that she sent him all these emails, asking questions. Sometimes nothing even gets acknowledged. It's very annoying. And at that point, and this was, as we said, February 18th of 2013, she even pointed out he didn't even work for her anymore. But he still can't check out. The way they had their arrangement was, even though he was maybe on unemployment, he was on unemployment at that point, right?
I believe so.
But even though he's on unemployment, their arrangement was, it was sort of expected that he's going to continue to help her out, right?
With any work that was undone from his time.
The big issue at this time, a constant source of emails, and you were aware of the situation, was with respect to this Brad Miller loan repayment, right?
All right.
You've heard the testimony about that. Basically, the plan was, Mr. Miller made some loans to his campaigns, correct?
Yes, sir.
Some of them were to his state campaign account from back in some previous years, back when he was a state representative, right?
Yes, sir.
So there's this money owed to him. And he knows that this federal campaign is going to shut down, so he wants to get his loans repaid, right?
I believe so.
Well, you've worked on, you think your phrase, I wrote it down yesterday, if I got it wrong, was you're a bit of a political nerd. That was the phrase you used. I'm just guessing you know this political game probably better than I do, but when a candidate stops running for office or leaves office, typically the donations reduce significantly, correct?
Yes, sir.
Because why do people want to give money to someone who's not running for something?
Yes, sir.
That'd be fair. When he knew he was getting out, Brad Miller was delayed somewhat in deciding what his career path was going to be at that point. He'd been in an elected office for, I think we said, over 20 years. That sounded, I mean, I know you haven't been in the game that long, but you know enough about the candidates that they worked with. That sounded about right to you,
Yes, sir.
between state and federal office.
Yes, sir.
And he's in this sort of limbo period where his lines have been redrawn, right?
Yes, sir.
And he's basically been, there's a word for it, he's been gerrymandered out of his district, right?
Yes, sir.
And he's not going to run against a fellow Democrat, David Price. He's not going to do that.
Yes, sir.
So, you know, what else? Governor, some other state office. This is sort of what's going on. You testified about it. This indecision about where he's going to go, what he might do. So he's not making any immediate plans about what he's going to do and where he's going to go, correct?
Correct.
You know, where he's going to land on his feet, it wasn't much of an issue. For U.S. congressman, he's going to be okay. But there was going to be this time frame after December 31st when he left office where he's not getting paid by the Congress anymore because essentially he's out of that job, correct?
I believe that to be true, yes.
And he was saying in his emails that, look, I want to get these loans repaid. It's money owed to him, He wants it repaid because he's going to use some of that money to sort of be you had a name for it, and I probably wrote it down somewhere, but it was just to sort of like handle his, be an income source while he's waiting to get secured into something else. Would that be fair? I think he said transition money.
Yeah, I believe that was what I was told. Yes, sir.
And and this was an issue for Jamie because after December 31st, the paychecks aren't coming in. He wants this done.
Yes, sir.
He wants his money
Yes, sir.
repaid to him.
Yes, sir.
And there are, you heard my questions of Mr. Wallace. There's rules about how that can get done, correct?
I believe so. Yes, sir.
There's this thing about you just can't take the federal account and write a check for the amount that's owed to him, say, in his state account, because there's rules prohibiting that, correct?
I believe that to be true. Yes, sir.
So they come up with the idea, and it's not, and others have done this, make donations back to certain, or refund donations back to certain donors, and then ask those donors to take a check, turn around, donate it back to the state account, and then he can be paid back on his loans, correct?
That was my understanding.
And that was one of the things that John Broyhill was tasked to do.
Yes, sir.
Brad Miller gave him, here's a list of people, here are the handwritten notes basically saying, I'm making you this donation back, can you just donate it back to the state account? Get the checks to these people and these amounts, ask the people, make sure they kick the money back, right? Basically, that's the plan.
My understanding was that the congressman would be calling these longtime friends and allies and asking them to asking them if they would write a check to the state account if they were refunded from the federal account. That was my understanding.
Yeah, if he did, I mean, if I don't know the guy, if he sent me a check back, I'm not giving it back to him. He's not running for office, I'd probably pocket the thing. If I knew him, he might ask me, say, hey, could you, if I write you this check, like for example, if he said, not that you were one of those donors, but Mr. Hahn, or Nation, $1,000 you donated, I really appreciate it. I'm not going to run for re-office. I'm going to send you a check for the refund. Would you mind taking that check and donating it back to my state account? They're going to repay off some loans that are owed to me. If you knew the guy well enough, I might do that. There's nothing wrong with it, right?
Unless I needed the money.
Well, yeah, there's nothing. Once he gives you that check back, you're under no obligation to do it.
Correct.
And that was an issue because there was no way to know whether or not these donors were really kicking the money back to the state campaign.
Yes, sir.
Brad Miller didn't really care about any of that. Brad Miller just wanted his money.
I can't speak to what Brad Miller wanted or didn't want.
Well, you did provide Detective Morse with all these emails, and there were a lot of emails from people from the Brad Miller campaign saying he's looking for his money. Are these loan things squared away? Is it taken care of? You saw all those because you gave them over.
Yeah, I know it was a point of frustration for folks.
And you know that this was something that was important to him because he may not be coming down to your house saying he wants it, but you're hearing from all the people that worked or were working for him at the time saying, let's go. What's the holdup?
Jamie was hearing from them, yes, sir.
Jamie was. And she was sharing everything with you.
Not everything, but a
Good
lot
portion
of things.
of it.
Yes, sir.
Do you remember forwarding to Detective Morse an email that Jamie sent to John March 1st of 2013? Telling him that he really needs to get back to Phyllis and Brad in a timely manner when they ask him about these money items. It's his main source of income right now. So we need to get these things taken care of and respond quickly. Even if you've already answered, or if it's Julie they need to talk to, they need an answer. Please continue to check your emails and get back to folks. I know we aren't really working for them, but they did pay us for a long time and we owe them. You remember that email?
Yes, sir.
And then after she sent it out, she sent one to you saying, I think to you asking, is that bitchy?
Yes, sir.
But it wasn't. She's just being an employer, right?
Yes, sir.
She'd asked this guy to do stuff. He wasn't doing it. She wasn't afraid to tell him to do what he had to do, right?
For the most part, right.
And a
Right.
lot of times when she did that stuff, I mean, she copied people on the email. She copied people like Phyllis Barber, right?
Yes, sir.
So that they could see, look, I'm handling it. I'm telling them, get it done. There were a number of emails as well. I don't know if this was actually, I haven't been able to figure out what this was about. There was something about Jamie asking John about a savings bond for a lady. Do you know what that was about?
I do not.
Okay. I ask you that because you were shown some exhibits, and there was a Post-it note that was on Jamie's desk,
Yes, sir.
and that was one of the things. Savings bond?
I do not know.
You don't know if that's connected to this at all?
I have no idea, sir.
Okay. But you do recall the email about the conversation with Phyllis Barber that I just read to you about?
Yes, sir.
And that was on March 1st. So all of January and all of February have elapsed, and apparently Brad Miller still doesn't have his loan money.
Yes, sir.
Now, look, John was at one point saying, I mean, basically all the time saying, I'm taking care of it, I'm taking care of it, right?
Yes, sir.
But sort of the old thing, actions speak louder than words. People are still complaining. It's obviously not getting taken care of, right?
I know that some things were moving. I believe that a portion of the money may have been repaid at some juncture. Or, I don't know. I know that there was some movement, but not. It wasn't being fulfilled or completed.
I was going to ask you about that. There was a Jamie would share with you some of the emails that she got from John in response to some of these things because she wanted to get your take on some of it, right?
Yes, sir.
She sent, there was a response sent by John on March 20th of 2013. It was copied to everybody. It was sent to Jamie. It was copied to Jamie, actually, and sent to Phyllis. And-
If I could object and find out what document number it is.
Sure, I'm sorry, 6937.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
That was the one that talked about John saying that he had taken care of the loan repayment, correct?
Yes, sir.
Two lump sums, $14,500, a personal loan that Mr. Miller gave to the campaign, a check he gave to an Adrian to deposit. Do you know who Adrian was?
No, sir.
Okay. 30,000. There was a reference to a $30,000 from the state account, to which 20,000 had already been deposited. You remember seeing that email, though, right?
Yes, sir.
There was a comment in there from John that Julie, that's a name we heard before, she'd been left in the dark, and he said that was his fault. Julie is Julie 2, correct?
I believe so. Yes, sir.
Julie 2 was the treasurer of Brad Miller's state campaign account.
I believe so. Yes, sir.
And she was also Brad Miller's niece, correct?
I believe so.
She was the one saying, she's on the receiving end. She's the one who's supposed to get the money so that she can cut the check back to Congressman Miller to pay off the loan.
I believe so. I'm not sure 100%.
Well, I mean, you retrieved all these emails, right?
Yes, sir.
And you gave them to Detective Morse, right?
Yes, sir.
And you reviewed them before giving them to him. Right?
Yes, sir.
So you saw all these names, and you
Yes, sir.
knew all the people, and you knew what was going on. You were part of her business. You said that she talked to you about it, and you stayed pretty hands on.
I didn't recognize all those names. I didn't know Adrian, for example, but yes, sir.
Toward the end of March, now that one we just talked about was March 1st, the one about the money being paid. That's the one where John Broyhill sends. Oh wait now, get out of sequence here. Okay, so John Broyhill's response is, I'm taking care of this, and that was on March 20th of 2013. Direct Mr. Fawcett to 6931.
Before we do that, we're going to go ahead and take a mid-afternoon recess, and we'll resume at 5 minutes till 4. So ladies and gentlemen, please don't discuss the case among yourselves or with anyone else. Don't form or express opinions about the outcome. No media or independent investigation into these matters. Please have no conversations with parties, witnesses, or lawyers. Leave your notepads, gather in the deliberation room at 5 minutes till 4. Everyone else, please remain seated.